Welcome to another episode of the Business of Digital podcast. Today we're talking about AI transformation and not the theory, but what it looks like when organizations actually start putting AI into action. I'm joined by three leaders who are right in the middle of that change. We have Noel Geer, founder and CEO of Connected Interactive, Sahil Razdan, Senior Legal Counsel, Samsung Electronics Canada, and Samsung Ads Canada, and Philippe Kleim, Vice President, National Revenue and Digital Advertising Strategy at Corus Entertainment. Thank you for coming over. So before we begin, I'd like you guys to introduce yourselves.
I'm Philippe Kleim. I work for Corus. It's one of the largest media company in the Canadian market. You've probably seen some of our content. We have brands like Global TV, Global News, Flavor, Home, Slice, Adult Swim, and many, many more. What I do at Corus is I oversee a sales team that is responsible to sell our linear TV and our digital assets to agencies and clients direct.
Noel Geer, CEO and co-founder of Connected Interactive. A little bit about me. I've been in the advertising industry for 25 years now. I started my company in 2012, focused originally on really the mobile space and understanding, how the app market plays with online, moving into programmatic, and have been really in the space of programmatic advertising technology and data now for the last 10 years, building audiences. What Connected is best known for is our ability to bring in offline purchase data into advertising capabilities and bonding offline behaviors with online behaviors so that you can target users based on actual purchases that are happening both in-store and online. Because today about 84% of retail sales are still happening in store. So it's a really big portion of what's happening. And we've partnered up with the likes of Benares, MasterCard, and so forth. So in Canada specifically, we see about half of transactions in the country that we can map to audiences and so forth.
Okay, Sahil Razdan, Senior Legal Counsel at Samsung Electronics Canada. Do a lot of their data privacy work, data protection, AI type work. Biggest internal client is Samsung Ads Canada, where we do anything from out of home ads to website ads and any other campaigns that we might have. I manage from the legal side there.
Well, the three of you are also chairs of your respective committees. Like Sahil, you're chair of the AI committee. Noel, you're with the mobile committee, and also Philippe, you're with the CTV committee. Thank you again for being here for this podcast. Now, let's start with you, Noel. You've been leading what sounds like a full-scale AI transformation, like retraining your teams, rebuilding your tech stack, and embedding AI across your operations and your tech. Can you tell us what that journey has been like?
Absolutely. We knew this was coming a long time ago, and there's no question. Right now is the opportunity to move on this because it's not going to be too long from now where it'll be too late and you'll just be kind of moving the way everybody else is. Yeah. So we saw that. We've obviously seen that coming for a while, but the biggest thing when you're in a company that is busy on an ongoing basis is where do you start? And so for us, starting with the fundamentals, setting up education, spending the money to get the resources in place to start building on the fundamentals internally. So investing into the education piece so that everybody in the company actually understands what this means, and starting there so that as we start to build out workflows and thinking about, agents and agentic AI and all that wonderful stuff, the fundamentals are there. So everybody understands the why versus just trying to shoehorn AI into the business. And so that's really where we've started. And now, that transformation, it includes, building. So we've been building technology now since 2012. I mean, we built our first mobile SDK in 2014. We were building dashboards, platforms, all kinds of stuff. That proprietary technology, our position now is really, we're moving away from the proprietary tech. We've got amazing data. That's what we're really diving into. And we're going to the cloud. We're going and building the tech stack so that the tech stack rises as the technology rises. and we can take advantage of all the coming changes that are coming in the market and stitch together in ways that are proprietary to us. So thinking about how AI, because everything's going to change so quickly, we want to be in a position where our data is the unique standpoint, how that gets integrated into these systems, right? So that when all these things change, we're just changing with it. When new AI systems come into place that we can take advantage of, we're there and we're rising with the tide, but we're finding unique ways to use it. And that's really been the key for us. So anything from internal workflows to even, getting into systems that will automate for us. And we're talking from, running campaigns to optimizing campaigns to optimizing automation within operations to even building proposals, doing research, and even little, once the data is flowing, using things like precision AI where you can build scoreboards on your business and understand really finite, unique things on a daily basis that are happening. And that's really where we're going.
Philippe, how does that compare to what is happening in a media organization like yours?
For us at Corus, because we're such a large company, there's many different use cases where AI can be leveraged. So I think for us, the way we're thinking about it, and I'm going to separate the two pieces, one more from a corporate standpoint and one more from a view of what I do on a day-to-day basis, which is advertising.
Right.
From a corporate standpoint, we have an AI committee. It's a group of people that come from different parts of the organization, sales, legal, content, pretty much everywhere. And each and every one of those teams, they come up and they submit use cases for AI. And it could be, I want to automate the way we look at content. I want to look at different ways of reviewing legal paperwork. I want to look at data assets and how we treat that. And then the AI company looks at it and basically decides what is required to get it done and if the use case is even viable. On the advertising side, I think what we really have been thinking about, I would separate it into two buckets. One that is more around what we want to build internally using AI, and that's a lot very similar to what you said, Noel, around how do we optimize workflows, how do we optimize processes, how can we do things quicker. And in that area, I would say there's stuff that we're likely going to build and there's stuff that we're going to rely on external vendors to help us with.
Right.
And then there's a whole other facet of how, in my opinion, AI is really going to be leveraged is everything around the data capabilities, right? How is data being utilized? Is there an easier way with artificial intelligence to better look at this data and activate on that data? And then the last thing I want to say is a lot of what's happening from a sales perspective is also working very closely in collaboration with the agencies and the clients to kind of understand what that AI connectivity looks like between all the different partners. It's an interesting chapter for us. I think being a big media company, there's lots of things that we have to be careful with, especially when it comes down to privacy, when it comes down to the trust that you put into AI agents, etc. I would say we are at the beginning of that whole journey. To your point, I think our AI approach is going to evolve as the market evolves, and the pace that it's going to evolve at.
It's quite interesting because AI it's like a buzzword for a couple of years now, but seeing the actual practical use being done within your organizations makes it so that it's coming into reality, right? What about you, Sahil? What's your experience?
Yeah, so I mean, everything that you guys said is exactly on point, and from a little bit of a larger scale, once you start implementing it the correct way, and when things get integrated together, you see things like the way we can integrate your watch to your phone, to your TV, to your dishwasher, to your laundry machine, and things like that, and the AI capability allows you to do all of that on such a large scale and create this environment within your home that you can leverage, and you can make your day so much easier and your life more efficient. I mean, there's a random example is if you're doing laundry, a lot of the time you do your laundry and you don't want it to sit there once it's done because then it starts getting that damp and that stale smell. But you can do something like throw your laundry in the laundry, leave your house when you're 20 minutes, 30 minutes away from home, go on your watch or on your phone, turn your laundry on. So by the time you get home, it's ready to go.
Right.
And then, like if you're sitting in a different room, for example, you're sitting around watching TV, your laundry's in a basement or in a different level of your home. When the laundry's done, you'll get a little notification on your TV or on your phone or on your watch. You can set it up that way. So to create just efficiencies within your life, implementing AI can help that in numerous ways for sure.
Your work really lives within the intersection of mobile, CTV, and AI. How does that ecosystem operate on the ground?
Yeah, so I mean, I gave a few examples of how that works just from a kind of granular level,
Right.
but the way that you can incorporate that into a day-to-day lifestyle, and the way that that kind of incorporates into ads and marketing and things like that from a consumer level is, you can understand with AI, you end up understanding behaviors, and you understand work-life balance and work styles and behaviors and things like that. So with the different pieces of technology that you have, for example, let's say you have a watch and you work out all the time, you use the workout apps and things like that. You can set it as precisely or as non-precisely as you want to eventually get ads that are targeted to your lifestyle of working out. Now, if you transition from being a single person to a married person, then to eventually having kids, the searches that you have on your phone or on your laptop, where you're searching up how to be a good dad, or what to do, like what to expect when you're expecting, all those things kind of filter into the ecosystem and into the diagnostics of everything and how you interact with your devices. And of course, you can not choose to do that if you want to, and if you don't want to get these targeted ads and see specialized ads and marketing from your
Right.
to your devices. But if you choose to incorporate those things into your life, there's a huge efficiency that comes along with that if you use it the right way. And it grows with you, as you said. You create a tech stack, and that continues to grow as things evolve. It's the same way with AI, and especially if you're integrating all of your lifestyle technology, so your TVs, your phones, your watch, it grows with you. So when you transition through these different phases of life and you search different keywords and criteria, or you interact with different ads, or you purchase different things around within different phases of your life, the AI grows with you. So it'll also incorporate giving you potential examples or suggestions as to what to buy next,
Right.
or what to look at next, or a good book to read, or what's good for food for a baby, or what's good for a healthy protein intake and things like that. So incorporating all of that together is definitely, again, brings so much efficiency to your life, and grows with you as you continue to grow.
I guess what I want to follow up with that is that, Philippe, from your end, what does that look like when you're a traditional broadcaster entering the space in a very similar fashion?
So I think you talked about it quite the right way, and I'm going to add. So your previous question was about AI is a big topic right now, and everybody's
Yeah.
talking about it. So we've had quite a lot of conversation, and I had many discussions with many partners and clients, and even internally with people that I work with on a day-to-day basis. I think for us, I think there's really two things that AI can do really well. Like one is, to your point, the connectivity between all the different data points, that it's becoming harder and harder to manage,
Right.
especially when you are a really large business. And it's not just managing the data; it's also getting outcomes and information from those data points that you can actually leverage
Right.
in some shape or form. So that's the first thing. The second thing, you can do everything faster with AI. And I had a conversation with somebody recently, and he was saying what we were doing in 5 or 6 or 8 months, we now do it in 3 weeks. What we were doing in a month, we now do it in a couple of days.
Right.
And it's, if you structure yourself properly, I think this is what we are working on really as being a large media company, is really structuring yourself to achieve those two goals. Is make your information cleaner, and then make it so that you can go faster in making decisions, make
Right.
it faster in terms of like dashboarding and reporting and all the different things that require human interaction. But if you really want to do everything manually, it takes you a lot of time, and AI can really simplify a lot of that.
Right.
And I think there's many use cases for this. Like one of the use cases that we've been working on, for example, is quite often we are asked about contextual targeting, right? And contextual targeting, just imagine when you think about connected TV or even linear TV, all the shows that we run on a daily basis, like every single moment in that video content, how do you actually structure it and segment it and properly look at it? So this is a use case, for example, where AI could help us look at all the different moments and kind of figure out like what those moments are so that we can better help our advertisers and agencies figure out where they want to be placed.
And I'm also assuming that this is happening with still with respect to user privacy.
Being on the legal side is how do you stay privacy friendly and
Right.
how do you make sure that whatever we do, there is a clear way of keeping our data protected, our users protected, and I think a lot of the time also when people talk about AI, it's that trust factor,
Right.
Like how do you make sure that whatever you do within that AI ecosystem helps you, helps the consumer, helps your clients, but in a way that it's completely safe and trusted. I think that's really the piece that is important.
Right. Anything to add to that, Noel?
So much.
Yeah.
There's a couple things. I mean, just to kind of touch on the speed factor. You know, we always look at everything from the viewpoint of value,
Right.
And value is really, it's what are the outcomes you're trying to achieve, over top of the time that it takes to get there and the pain that you have to go through to get there, right? So I'm trying to, goals and outcomes over top of time and pain. And what's interesting is so often when people talk about value, they always talk about the two top parts, but the actual unlimited value is speed and pain. So when you can get there fat, people pay more for speed. Ozempic is so popular because people want to get rid of fat quickly and they're willing to pay for it versus go to the gym for 8 months. The unlimited opportunity with AI is that speed component, and that creates such massive value. The other part is the pain that it takes to learn to get to a certain point, right?
Yes.
And so when you can take speed and multiply that exponentially, and also the opportunity with AI to use things like synthetic data to test and learn before you even go to market and actually avoid some of those pain points, really is an exponential growth on value. So the ability to get somewhere quickly, test and learn in an environment that actually doesn't cause so much pain to get there is massive in terms of value. Now on the privacy side, like that's all, I mean, we are as far as data is concerned, we're holding a database of 45,000 different audience behaviors, and we have to protect that, and it's really important. Privacy first always is the motto, because if we don't have that, then we can't do what we do. And I think that that's also the part that we have to really, really hone in on. So when we're talking about it, trust is the big component, and that's where I think the technology still needs some work. So the web itself is built on trust. There's the flip side to AI, where that's actually in danger long term, because can I trust the information I'm seeing? Do I know that that was actually a real person?
Right.
The flip side of that is that trust component. That's where I think the opportunity for things like blockchain and Web3 come into play. And when we think about how do we maintain that trust, we think about decentralized solutions like the blockchain, like what IAB Tech Labs is doing right now to give publishers the ability to look at this stuff, have tokens, verify, and create a verified system.
Right.
And that's the part I'm really interested to see where that goes, because I really feel in the next 2 to 3 years, there needs to be some, stakeholders involved pushing this as sort of the next stage of where we're going, because that trust is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want to go back because you did mention a lot about what you do within Connected Interactive to implement AI across the organization. And those are great examples. But I want to get into the reality of adoption. I think in one of our conversations, you did mention that a huge number of AI implementations would fail at around a rate of 85%. You can check me on the data.
Yeah.
But why is that happening?
So there's a stat that, is out there that just in general, on average, there's, implementation happening, and it more often than not, it's not giving people the outcomes that they were expecting. And that is because of the shoehorning of using the
They're
solution.
forcing AI into the process.
Yeah, that's not to say that there's not a huge lift. On the flip side, there's a 75% lift on efficiencies that people are seeing.
Right.
But again, it's the speed and pain. So testing it and learning it over and over again to get to that point. So it's the number of implementations to get to the point where it works. That's where the fundamentals come in. And the fundamentals are such things like prompt engineering.
Right.
That is one of the biggest differences that I've seen in terms of making it give you the output that you're looking for. If you don't understand the fundamentals of how to build a proper prompt, and sometimes it takes forever to build some of these prompts.
Yeah.
Where you want to supply examples, you want to supply specifics, and the craziest thing that I've seen is the fact that if you tell the AI how important this is to you, it will actually improve the outcome.
Right.
I mean, that is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I built a prompt to help my mom search for something, and I told the AI, this is for my 85-year-old mother, and she really needs this. And they're seeing evidence now that these types of notions, emotional prompts within the prompt,
Right.
are actually increasing outcomes by 15 to 20%. There's a platform called Prometheus.
Yeah.
So there's different sections of the prompt, right? You got your role, you got your task, you got your specifics, you got your examples, you got your notes, and these are, use hashtags to kind of create what they call markdowns, so the AI can understand what each section. So there's a platform called Prometheus. You can put it into each section and actually test the prompt and test different LLMs to tell you how expensive it will be to get the outcome from the prompt. But it's like a prompt optimizer. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But things like these and implementing this, but in order to even be able to think along those lines, the fundamentals is extremely important.
And I think aside from the fundamentals, it's also governance within the AI transformation projects within each and every organization, right?
Understanding open source versus closed source. What does that mean?
Exactly.
N8N versus make. Because N8N is if you have developer capabilities, that's more of an open source solution that you can kind of put some guardrails on. All that kind of stuff, really, really important. And I do find a lot of times people don't think about that.
Any thoughts, Sahil?
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. And when it comes to kind of managing all of this, and you sometimes get to the point of diminishing returns with AI, I think, because you can have all the capability and resources to do something, but do you really need to do that thing? Like all the cameras in the world on phones right now, they have the ability to have like multiple 100 megapixels on a camera. Then the AI will top it up and do an even more perfect picture. But then our eyes can't process
it. Yeah.
So what's the point of doing that? Like, where are we going? Why do we need to put all the time, resources, and money into that? And I always give this example of, you get to a point sometimes where if you're, for example, applying for a job, and you have people that have their whole resume written by AI, then the job description was written by AI. Then you submit your resume, and then the resume is filtered through an AI bot to pick out the right resumes. And then you have like potentially your first interview process or your first interview set scheduled for you, and that's sent out by an AI machine to schedule that interview. So who is actually being hired? Who's the interviewee? And what's it's like AI hiring AI. And is that something that the world needs? It does make things more efficient, but you have to then think about striking the balance of like supporting a need for the world or for society versus the need for commerce and business and making money versus something that will make the world better or something that we're just doing for the sake of doing. And it's definitely a tough balance. And of course, through different industries, it's different, but it's sometimes it's hard to weigh all of those things at the same time.
Yeah. If you're not thinking about the human interaction within it,
Right.
you're completely taking away
Yeah.
your proprietary
Yeah.
capabilities. Like
Exactly.
if you just carbon copy and do exactly like what you're talking about, which is happening in so many cases,
Right.
implement the capabilities, bring in the technology, but don't lose your human touch within that.
Right.
Use it as a platform to increase your human touch.
Right.
And remember how important that human touch is, because that's the thing that's going to separate you from people.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that we want, which is why things like verification is so important. We don't want to be talking to an AI all the time. Like that'd be like, do you want to sit on your computer all day? Hell no. You know, that's why people still go to the store. And so that human connection and using AI to scale that is that's where the winners are going to play, because human intervention is still always going to be super important, and we cannot get away from that. And if we think that we do not want to build a world of just robots. That's not the goal. The goal here is to help scale, help get us there, make our lives easier in doing it, but allow us to bring more human element to what it is we're doing, not less.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And it's interesting that you brought out the some thoughts on scale, because on a different perspective, like Philippe, for you in a larger media organization wherein you might want to implement AI at scale, I would assume that a lot of change management has to happen, right?
Well, that, but also I would say, to your point, the talent.
The talent.
To like it's a different way of thinking. When you talked about what you just talked about, like a couple of things came to my mind. One is like, talent. You have to start thinking about this differently, and how do you approach it? I think you also, your point around, you said 85% of companies are like gonna try
Implementations.
and implement. Yeah. I think it's an interesting take, because a couple of weeks ago I had the opportunity to I was at an event, and Terence Kawaja, who is the creator of the Lumascape, had this amazing presentation on AI, and I think it was one of the best presentations I've seen in a very, very long time. It was fantastic. He basically separated the AI, the future of AI companies and merger and acquisition, into three different buckets. There was a first bucket that was like, big media companies trying to invest into the AI ecosystem. There was a second bucket of startups that are being built on the promise of AI and what AI can do. And there was a third bucket that he called posers. Posers. And those were companies that like they say they do AI, but in theory it's just like machine learning algorithm or whatever it is. And I think this is the piece that every single company has to be very careful with, is like, bring something to the game. Don't just like, use the term AI to create a buzz. Try to bring something to the table that is unique and that actually puts the stuff forward. For us at Corus, for example, one of the areas like that we've been debating, and I read a lot of things around that, is if you really want some of those agents to give you the proper information back, you also need to feed them the information in advance. And so one of the areas, like, for example, having Global News, which is a very trusted news publication in the Canadian market,
Right.
that the hope at one point is also that some of that trusted news information gets somehow into those agents and gets somehow into those AI platforms. Because the one thing that we haven't talked about yet, AI is also going to disrupt everything we do as a media company.
Right.
Yeah.
Like we rely a lot on search, and search is being replaced by AI. So how do we feed in our information into those AI systems so that when somebody types in a prompt about something, they actually get the proper feedback and they find us?
Right.
So for us, that's also something that we really started thinking about. It's hard to think about when it's a very nascent ecosystem. Who do you work with? Who do you partner with? How do you feed this stuff in?
True.
Like, where do you start? Where does it end? Like, how is it monetized? Like, like we know how it took us years to figure out how somebody going into a search platform or like a Google search goes in and search for something and then ends up on Global News.
Yeah.
We don't know yet how that's gonna work with AI. Like we don't know. We don't know how we're gonna be featured. We don't know how those users are gonna come to us. So that's a whole area that we're trying to figure out as a media company. And again, partnering with the right people along the chain to understand how you exist in that ecosystem. And then to your point, once you exist in that ecosystem, how do you bring that stuff back up? How do you bring it back up to clients, advertisers, partners, people that we
Exactly.
work with
Yeah.
to kind of close the loop? So it's still very early in that stage, but those are kind of the steps that we have to go through and partner with the right people, partner with the right companies and the right people to make it work.
There's a really good podcast by the CMO of HubSpot called Marketing Against the Grain. They showed Google search. It's not going down. It's actually continuing
They
to
have
go up.
AI mode.
Well, no, but Google search they're it's increasing.
Right.
However, the conversion rates are reducing. So conversions now, organic conversions, and we're talking organic, from SEO have dropped substantially,
Oh.
whereby only 1 to 2% of the traffic is actually coming from AI, but something like 50 to 60% of the conversions
Oh wow.
are coming from AI. So it's way less traffic, but the conversion rates are insanely high in comparison. So you've got some of these platforms like Profound and some of these other guys that are doing the AEO stuff. It's really interesting to see where that's going to go, because that but brand, right? Like kind of bringing this back to the advertising game. This is where we're pushing brands really hard and clients really hard, that brand is becoming even more important. The vanity metrics are going to start going away.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you want to actually be asked, if you want to get in front of it, you need to be asked for. I believe video is going to become such a massive player in brand, so that when you're talking to your AI, you are specifically asking for the brand, not just the product. Because if it's the product, then it's going to be one AI talking to another. But if you specifically ask for Coke, or you specifically ask for, whatever the brand is, and that's going to come from understanding how to build organic content. That's going to come from how do you actually, build really good creative, really good storylines, all that kind of stuff, and use those channels to drive that brand, drive that upper funnel, because in the end, that's probably what's going to matter most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about impact, and it's great that we're talking about this at that level, because I feel like impact is something that we need to have a focus on. And going back to you, because we see that AI is transforming even how we consume media and how media is selected for us. I think that's one aspect that we need to focus on. Philippe, what are you seeing on that front, at least on the Corus side?
Well, so I think what we hear is a lot of the work that we've been doing so far has mostly been around how do we work with the partners in terms of like, what do they want from us? What is the information that you would like us to feed into your different AI systems?
Right.
That whole point I made earlier about the speed, that is usually the number one thing that everybody's asking for, is like, how, if I want to buy an ad on Chorus, how quickly can I go from I have a brief to I want to book something to what is the outcome? And that whole chain, if you think about it from, I mean, we've all been in the digital advertising business for a very long time.
Yeah.
We all know how manual that can be, between, the insertion order, responding
back
to
in
the
the day,
brief,
insertion order.
responding to the brief, and then the brief gets like dissected, and then you respond back, and then there's a negotiation process, and then we talk about the rates, and then we go back and forth, and then we don't know if it's going to be programmatic or direct or whatever. And, and then if you start doing an integration, it even becomes more complicated. By the time you have this book, you have to deliver the campaign, and then usually there is information that you can pass along the pipes to give you real-time information. But there's also scenarios where you have to create a post report, and the post report becomes very complicated because you have different ad servers, you have different systems, you have all the different pieces, and it all needs to come together. And we haven't even talked about the fact that data sits in the middle of all of this, and we're talking about audiences, right? So I think what we hear a lot from our clients is that, how do we go from that initial brief all the way down to audiences very quickly? Like, if I have a brief, I'm trying to reach those very specific audiences. And to your point, I think this is what you were saying, where you were saying that brand is going to be more, that the all those metrics that we've been looking at for the longest time, they become less important
Yeah.
in a world where, as an advertiser, as a client, as a marketer, you know that the audiences that you reached actually are interacting with you. They're interacting in a certain way, and you get that outcome almost immediately. And I think that's what we heard a lot. Now, look, are we there? No, like we're not even close to like having that whole chain figured out. But it's something that we are thinking about. Certain agencies have built their own AI ecosystem. I mean, we all know WPP. Like they've been very open about how they look at the future, and this is one of the partners that we've started having discussion with about how do we feed our information in there, how do we work with them, how do we get all the different pieces together, and that's really step one for us.
We're looking at systems like Airtable, HubSpot, and actually starting to create systems where we can actually go from proposal to contract automated, and that system. So we're what we're doing is we're building basically the framework right now of a system where we can build in a way to create a proposal through a form with multiple inputs, and that gets captured. And then when that gets captured, you can renegotiate that. And all you have to do is change a couple things, but it sort of automatically changes the digital proposal. And then when that digital proposal gets signed, it's a digital signature that then triggers a workflow that creates an entire schedule based on when everything needs to be captured, and creates triggers based on, okay, this needs to be in at this time, this needs to be in at this time. And if it's not, there's another trigger that goes out, an email that goes to everybody. But the system is in place, templated, based on exactly the parameters that it needs and understands, so we can start automating that process and get to these things quicker, and even reconciliation down to invoicing and all that wonderful stuff. So that's one of the applications that we're looking at, so that we can build that system, tie it to another table within like an Airtable, and then because it's tied there, we can start bringing in things like N8N and build workflows and other agents and start plugging those things in, and also integrate that into things like Tableau and so on and so forth, and start building this kind of ecosystem that gets us to that point.
The step two is really in what I described, and you kind of like went that way, is how do you bring in the agents? Like once you have that those connectivities happening, and you have figured out how the process and the workflow works, that's where you start bringing in the agents, because that's the extra step in the whole process. And
just to give some advice on that, the only way to do that is to bring it into the cloud. If you don't have it in the cloud, then you won't be able to do that. But when you do that, it's really important that you use systems in place so that you still own that data. So you don't want to just push data into the cloud. You've got to have a system where you own it, and you're normalizing it. That's what you're putting into the cloud, and that's how you're creating those intersections. So then you can start plugging these things in and start creating those automations. Really, really important. And that's where,
we come
legal
in.
piece, that's where the legal piece comes in.
It's a fine line, right? So, that's exactly why on our end we've moved our dev team over to that specifically. It's like understand those things and focus all your attention on how we're going to plug all these things together. Use the cloud in a privacy safe way, all that kind of stuff.
That's a great segue though, because I think my last question is that, with all of the things that AI can do for us, all the opportunities that it can open, there's also that bit of responsibility that we need to have in place, right? So Sahil, looking at you, how do you see, ethical use of AI? I mean, is that something that we need to be focused on, and what does it look like?
For sure. And I think to take it a little bit of a step back, I think with the basic understanding that I think people find difficult to wrap their minds around, or even if they can understand it, they don't keep it top of mind, is ultimately the data in all of this is the currency, right? If you're using an AI tool and it's free, your data, you are the currency, your information, your data, exactly. And that goes for the consumer side, but also for like a publisher side, or the manufacturer developer side, for a company side, because understanding that fundamental principle that the data is the currency eases up a lot of the issues when it comes to getting clean data, or getting data that is useful to develop a develop your business or generate proper learning and not non-biased algorithms and things like that. But it also is very important for the privacy side, because once you understand that that is the currency, and people, if you're physical currency, people are very hard to give away their dollars, their hard-earned dollars. People are also probably pretty difficult to give away their currency,
Yeah.
their personal information, their data as their currency. And if you take a look at the EU, for example, the European Union, they're doing a great job with bringing on AI into the forefront. They've actually developed a EU AI Act, which is putting privacy and responsible AI use at the forefront. And they're basically structuring it such that they're working with industry and stakeholders, and they're putting that at the
Right.
forefront and saying, you know what, we got to put this privacy first, and we're going to look at the individual industries and say, okay, well, what are the risks in this industry? What's the risk in the medical industry using AI? What's the risk in construction? What's the risk in education? And depending on the risk factors and the risk levels, they're assigning different levels of responsibility and obligation when it comes to incorporating AI. So medical industry, health information is extremely important, extremely sensitive. They're going to have more obligations and more checks to check off and more hoops to jump through to incorporate AI into the medical industry and doctors and dentists versus somebody that is, I don't know, I'm using it to check NBA stats, for example.
Yeah.
So they're doing that kind of thing. It's kind of like a skill, which I think is a brilliant idea. They're also incorporating, we always use data privacy impacts. We do assessments on those kinds of things across the board. They're doing human rights impact assessments. They're doing fundamental human rights impact assessments. They're doing things like assessments for how the use of AI could impact the human, the actual individual person. And they're making those mandatory across the board for any corporation, any organization of a large size that wants to incorporate AI. And they're doing amazing things to kind of bring the human element, as you keep saying, to the forefront, and to make sure that we're protected from that angle. And the final thing I'll say on that is, I think it's important to kind of bridge that governance or the governmental policy and regulation with industry and industry stakeholders, because it's a lot easier to make people follow a certain rule or certain law when they're involved in developing it. And if you're taking into consideration what their pain points are, you can make sure that you handle those pain points, but then also keep the human element at the forefront. And that develops things like transparency in coding, transparency in how algorithms are learning, letting people understand how those things happen from the back end, creates trust from the consumers, creates trust from the industry, and things like making sure that we've always heard that privacy by design
Right.
quote,
Right.
but AI by design is a huge thing now. It's incorporating the idea from the ground level that AI has huge capabilities and can be a very useful tool, but can also be a very dangerous tool if not used and implemented correctly. And then you take away things like the algorithmic bias that can come just from coding and just from anybody putting in their own version of their life into how they code an algorithm. And it's not necessarily intentional, but it can create a bias in how outcomes come out and things like that. So those would be probably the 3 or 4 different things that I think we should start implementing here on the North American side, because the European side is quite ahead of us on that.
I think this is where the use of synthetic data can really kind of come in. Once you get to a point where you've got the ability for like an AI to run every scenario, that requires like compute, right? So like size and scalable compute. But
Yeah.
synthetic data is potentially a way to help protect privacy as well.
Mhm.
Because if you just need a very small data set like of data, human data, to then run every potential scenario through an algorithm that can actually use that and build synthetic data from it, then you only need very small pieces to kind of plot out things like precision or predictive algorithms, and in doing so you can also protect privacy in that way, right? So the future is also how do you incentivize the audience on that front as well? So there's
Like there's value for them as well.
that's the thing.
Mhm.
Value exchange it's such an interesting thing. I mean, when we first started in the industry, That's all we did was value exchange in mobile was, inside of mobile opportunities. What are you giving this person to get them, kind of thing? The whole gaming system, mobile gaming was built off that. Watch an ad, get a credit, play a game.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So I think there's a future where that value exchange can become, a bigger part of the ecosystem as well. But yeah, how those play together is interesting. I think maybe that's going to give us ways to enhance that privacy side.
Philippe?
The only thing I would add is, from a legal perspective, it just feels like, this is what we see at Corus. I think we want to be as cautious as possible. I think you said it, you could get into very dangerous territory in certain areas if it's not properly controlled and structured and governed. I think the piece also that we all have a responsibility as an industry, I guess, to kind of figure out exactly what the guidelines are. I think it's going to take some time. I'm not sure that the talent really exists to really understand the full scope of what we're trying to do here. So I think we're going to learn. We've been in this industry, all of us have been in the industry for quite some time. And 20 years ago when digital advertising started, there were also quite some dangerous areas that everybody was trying to kind of figure out. So I think it's very early, and I think it's very important for everybody to kind of know what the guidelines are and make sure that you stay within the proper framework. And I think that's what we're trying to do at Corus, is really making sure that whatever we do is we know that what we do is privacy friendly and we are within the guidelines. And I think I like what you said also about the EU being very looking at this from a very large scope in terms of what it means. And I think that's what we should be doing also as Canada, just having some guidelines and guardrails and making sure that the way we approach this is safe.
Yep. And certainly for us at IAB Canada, we're keeping a close watch on this. And we want to be sure to help the industry as we all move towards, use of AI in an ethical and a responsible way. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And for our listeners, for the Business of Digital podcast, stay tuned for more conversations on how innovation is changing the face of media in Canada. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.